I'm James Lynch, and this is my stock report for UFC Vegas 96, taking a look at the biggest winners and losers from the event. And I think on this edition, it's pretty easy to know who the biggest stock riser is, and that's got to be Kaio Borio, getting a decision victory over Gerald Cannonier in the main event, nearly finishing Cannonier in that 5th round. He looked great. Good test for him. 5 rounds. Nice to get that experience. And taking out a top 5 guy in Gerald Cannonier is no joke. So Borio, this was sort of the breakthrough performance he needed. Of course, he's coming off the win over Paul Craig, but this win much bigger. I know Cannonier's a little bit older, but Cannonier's also a guy that's been in there with some of the best, has some really good wins. This was a big stock rise for Borio. What didn't really like the call out of Dricus du Plessis, because obviously there's a bit of a logjam in the middleweight division right now. But I mean, I think he could have made a case for Adesanya, Israel Adesanya. He could have made a case for a lot of other people in this weight class here. If you're looking at the top 5 rankings right now, you got to think here right now. We've got, Imavov, Whitaker, maybe the winner of Imavov and Brendan Allen could fight him next. It's all really going to depend what happens with Israel Adesanya. I did a video on my channel this week talking about what I think could be next for Adesanya. But either way, Borgio's in a great spot here. 31 years old and a guy that just got a huge win over a top 5 guy. Got to give credit to Kaio Borio. Okay, second biggest stock riser on this card. Kind of an obvious one as well, but you got to give him credit. Michael Morales. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, going into this fight, what was he? A huge betting favorite. He kind of did what he was supposed to do, right? He was minus 900. I didn't even realize he was that big of a favorite, but when you're fighting competition that you should be beating, one of the ways to, not make people focus so much on the level of opposition is going out there and finishing them. And he does so in the very first round. I want to say that's Magny's last knockout loss since, I want to say, Ponzinibbio. It's been a while since Neil Magny's been finished. I know, again, Magny 37, and yes, sort of had an up and down career in the UFC, although looking at his losses prior to this fight, you had Ian Gary, Gilbert Burns, Shavkat. I mean, that's the who's who as far as contenders in the weight class. And yeah, if you look at it here, Ponzinibbio was last time he was finished. That was back in 2018. So for Michael Morales to do that, big win. Obviously going to be in the rankings now. If you're looking at that top 15, Magny was ranked number 12. Like, what about him and Vicente Luque if they don't end up doing that Nick Diaz fight? That could make some sense, although Luque I see ranked lower. Maybe the winner of Buckley and Stephen Thompson. That seems to make sense. But either way, Michael Morales, 25 years old. I think we forget how young he is. Going out there and getting a quick win over Neil Magny. Big win for him. His stock definitely went through the roof last night. And then my last biggest stock riser on this card is someone that I picked on the preview show, and I got a bit of flack for this, but he ends up coming through, and that's Gerald Merlin. Now, the reason I put Gerald in this spot, maybe as opposed to some other people, and again, let me know in the comments what your top 3 stock risers and top 3 stock droppers are. But to me, if Merlin lost this fight and was going to get finished, which is, it almost looked that way in this fight, I know he was coming off the win over Barberena, but he had lost, a couple fights prior to that. He might have been released from the UFC. We don't know. In fact, I believe this was one of the last fights on his deal, whether it's the 3rd or 4th one. I can't remember exactly. But for him to beat Edmond Shabazian, that's a big win. Plus 250 underdog. Looked like he was down and out prior to him getting the finish, but he pulls it out. And this is one thing with Mershart. If you can't put him away early, he can come back and get that submission win. How many submission wins does he have now? It's like some record in the UFC. Look at that, 29 wins by submission. He's got more submission wins than some fighters do in their entire UFC career. It's pretty crazy. So good for Gerald Merlin getting it done. Have to mention him as a stock riser just because how do you not keep him around in the UFC after that type of performance? Gerald Merlin, big stock riser on this card. Let's do a couple honorable mentions though. Got to give a shout out to Tabitha Ricci taking out Angela Hill. I know Ricci was favored going in, and I picked her, and I think a lot of people picked her in this fight, but just the fact that, she's continuing to move up the ranks, taking out a tough veteran, Angela Hill, very good there. Got to also mention Ryan Loder and Myron Santos for getting wins on The Ultimate Fighter, both finishes. That's what you like to see from a show like this, so they got to give a quick shout out as well. And then going on the undercard, got to mention Kong Wang taking out Victoria Leonardo. What a way to make your debut, getting a first round finish like that. Again, she was also a big favorite going in this fight, but like I said, if you're going out there and fighting subpar opposition, but you're finishing them, that's exactly what you need to do. So Kong Wang, big win for her there. Okay, let's switch gears now and go to the biggest stock droppers. And thumbnail always gives it away, but and this is up for debate. I'm curious to hear what you guys think in the comments here, but I'm going to explain why he's in this number 1 spot, and that's Edmond Shabazian. Now look, Edmond Shabazian, I think is, again, going in was a big favorite. I pretty much said this fight was going to go one of two ways. Either Shabazian was going to finish Gerald Merlin via TKO, or Merlin was either going to submit him or win a decision. I actually said decision. I didn't think he would submit him. But it's a couple things. Number one, that's the first submission loss for Edmond Shabazian in his career. He's 26, but now he's in a really tough spot. Like, you could use the argument before with Shabazian that he's losing to pretty good opposition, right? Brunson was ranked at the time, Hermansson, Imavov ranked, Anthony Hernandez looks like the real deal. He might even end up beating Michel Pereira in a few months here. But the fact that this is like the first time he's had a loss against a guy that's not really ranked or anything special, and it's like, you gotta win fights like this. And I think with Shabazian, like, where does he go from here? I think we've seen enough evidence that you basically know how to beat him. You just have to survive the first round or survive any sort of onslaught, and he'll get a little bit tired, and then people will take advantage, or fighters will take advantage of that. So, and again, you look at his wins, Dalcha, I don't believe is in the UFC. AJ Dobson, I think, sort of holding on to a job. And then a lot of these other guys aren't in the UFC anymore, like Darren Stewart and Charles Byrd. So, yeah, I just think Shabazian really took the biggest hit here. Because he's young, you hope that he can turn a corner, but we're kind of getting to this point where it's like, when is it going to change? Like, if you would have told me a couple years ago, after head kicking Brad Tavares and, being undefeated, if he would have lost to Gerald Merlin, I would have said, there's no way. But now, like, you don't know. I think every fight, it's a little bit different. So I will give him credit because he almost did finish Gerald in the second round. But at the same time, the optics of it look like this is a guy who can't get it done, even in fights he's supposed to win. Like I mentioned, going in here, he was like a minus 300 favorite. Minus 310 favorite, and 80% of people picked him in this fight. Like, you got to win these fights, and he didn't, so he's the biggest stock dropper. Now, here's another one that I know people would maybe contest with Shabazian, and that's Jared Cannonier, because optically, Cannonier's in a far worse spot. Cannonier's now 40 years old. Any thought of him fighting for a title? I mean, I think we could have mentioned that even the last fight, while it was controversial against Imavov, the fact that he lost and middleweight's already a bit of a logjam really put him behind the 8 ball anyways. But now losing 2 fights in a row now in a fight that I think was winnable for Cannonier, but I think age is finally catching up to him. Injuries, it happens to the best of the best. And now that's back-to-back losses for the first time in Meerschaert's middleweight career. Obviously, he lost back-to-back fights at light heavyweight. But yeah, where does he go? I mean, I think at this point, it's about building other guys off of him. That's kind of what this fight was. But I think you go even lower down the rankings and sort of figure out who he could fight. I'm not saying like a Bo Nickel, but like even someone like an Ikram, I think would probably be next for Cannonier after losing this fight. I know Ikram's not ranked, but someone along those lines, because honestly, I think right now after last night's performance, I think most fighters in this weight class beat him outside of maybe like a Vettori or, I don't know if Brendan Allen would get past him, but, there's a few names in here. Maybe you do Dolidze if he beats Kevin Holland, you could do Dolidze and Cannonier next. That could make sense. Although, what does UFC get out of that? 2 older middleweights. I think you're better off taking a younger fighter. Maybe the winner of Pereira and Hernandez. That seems more likely. Because again, those guys are a bit younger, and I think that could make some more sense there. But yeah, for Cannonier, I think it's safe to say, and you could have even made this argument last fight, safe to say his title aspirations are kind of gone at this point. He's had a shot at the title. He fought Adesanya a couple of years ago, but I think even more so now. Tough loss for Jared Cannonier. One of my favorite guys to interview, one of the fun fighters to watch, but age catches up to everyone, and unfortunately for Cannonier, it looked like that last night as he nearly got finished in that 5th round, losing a decision to Kaio Borio. Next stock dropper on this card is just someone that, again, he's had, all the opportunities in the world. And I know he wasn't supposed to win this fight. And I know this fight was on short notice as far as the opponent switch up. But Dennis Bazooka, to me, another big stock dropper here. It's 26 years old, but he's now had, a couple losses in the UFC, losing 3 of his last 4. I don't know if that was the last fight on his contract, but if it was, like, how would the UFC re-sign him at this point? He's got 1 win. 2 losses. One of them, I'll get, the Woodson loss. Woodson's pretty good. Mind you, that was a fight he also came in a bit heavy. Jamal Emmers, you should probably beat. And a Francis Marshall, I know the fight was close, ended up being a split, but that's one I think he should be winning. And the reason Bazooka's on here is just because, again, he might be getting released after this. So that's where, you would have expected a little bit more, and credit to Francis Marshall for coming through and getting the win there. And that's pretty much it for the stock report. Like, there wasn't a ton to take away from this card as far as stock risers and stock droppers. Again, we had 2 Ultimate Fighter guys, so I didn't really feel good about putting like a stock either way because we don't know much about them other than watching them on the TV show. But I think that's pretty fair overall as far as my stock risers, stock droppers. So just to quickly recap, stock risers include Kaio Borio, Michael Morales, and Gerald Merlin. Honorable mentions to Tabitha Ricci, Kong Wang, Myron Santos, and Ryan Loader. And then your stock droppers are Edmond Shabazian, Jared Cannonier, and Dennis Bazooka. So, like I say every single time I do this video, I don't want to hear what you like and don't like about my picks. I want to hear your top 3 and your bottom 3, and I want to hear why you think they're better than mine. That's fine. That's totally fine if you want to say, these are my picks. But it's so lazy when people go and say, I don't agree with this, and then they don't give any solutions of their own. So just please, in the comments, put your top 3, bottom 3. Would love to hear from you. Let's have a fun debate about this. And remember, we're off this week for the UFC, so no preview show. Tomorrow, I will be doing just a regular Q&A, and then we'll come back for the Sean Brady and Gilbert Burns card after that. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching. This is the Stock Report, and I'll see you after the next event.